I'm going to be talking about getting started on your first crochet project today. So this video is specifically about our Learn to Crochet kit, and so these are the things that are going to be included in your kit, but this is going to apply to getting started with any project. So the first thing that you want to do is gather the supplies that you'll need and make sure you have the right supplies for the project that you're doing. So the first thing that people think about the most is going to be your yarn. You want to make sure that you get yarn that is the same thickness that the pattern is calling for. So in this case, it is a worsted weight, which is that number 4. That's the most common thickness of yarn out there. And you want to get the crochet hook that is going to be the size recommended. So this crochet hook has the size printed on it, and most of them do. It's a 5.5 millimeter, which is again what the pattern is recommending and what that thickness of yarn usually recommends. It's also nice to have a pair of scissors or yarn snips, a tapestry needle to weave in your ends when you're finished, and a tape measure if you're working on something that's going to say work however many inches before you go. So it's nice to have all of your supplies in one place so that you're ready to go and get started. So once you're actually ready to begin, you will want to take the ball band, so that's just the piece of paper that comes with your ball of yarn. Take that piece of paper off. I would recommend keeping the paper because it's going to give you important information like the name of the yarn, the color, the dye lot, all of that kind of stuff. But you don't need to keep it on your yarn while you're working. So once you're working with your ball of yarn, so this is a yarn that is in what's called a cake. So it was a skein and it was wound on a regular ball winder into a cake. A lot of hand-dyed yarns or small company yarns may come in this kind of a shape, or you may wind your own ball into this kind of shape. There are a lot of other shapes that balls of yarn can come in, but all of them are going to have in common that you will need to find the end before you get started. So you're always going to have 2 ends of every ball of yarn. You're going to have the end that comes from the outside of the yarn. So you can see as I'm unraveling this end of yarn is coming from the outside of the ball. If you are working your crochet project and pulling from this end, your yarn is not very likely to get tangled up, but your ball of yarn is going to kind of roll around as you unravel it. The other option for an end comes from the center. You can kind of dig around in there and pull out the yarn from the center if you can find it. This can be a great option for getting started. Your ball of yarn will not. So here's the end there that comes from the center. As you pull from the center, your ball of yarn is not going to roll around. It's just going to sit in one place. But as you keep pulling, eventually you're going to hollow out the middle of this ball. So this is a ball of yarn that I have pulled from the center. You hollow out the middle of the ball of yarn, and depending on the project, you may find as you get to this point and the ball collapses, it may start to tangle up on you, and you may need to stop and untangle it. So there's pros and cons to pulling from both directions. It is completely up to you which way you want to go with that. I generally these days prefer to pull from the outside just because I don't like untangling yarn. So that is where I'm going to get started. So once you've got the right yarn, the right thickness, the right crochet hook, your other materials gathered, and you found the end of the ball of yarn that you want to work with, you are going to be tying a slip knot. Now, if you already know how to do this, any way works. If not, this is the way that I prefer to do it. I like to lay my yarn down. You do want about a 6-inch tail hanging off your slip knot. You don't want to put your slip knot just like a tiny close to the edge right there with just a short little tail. So I'm going to lay my yarn out. I'm going to give it half a turn. So at this point, I think it looks like a fish, where here's the fish's head and here's this tail fins. Can you tell I have toddlers? And I am going to reach through that fish's head, and I'm going to grab one of the tails. You're going to grab one of the tails. I'm going to leave the long ends of the tails on the outside, and I am just going to pull. And you will know that you've done it correctly if you pull the tails here and your loop gets smaller. If you pull your tails and nothing happens, try again. So if you keep pulling, the whole knot will come out, and you'll be ready to try again. So again, I like to lay it out, give it half a turn, reach through the fish's head, leave the tails on the outside, and just pull. And once you have tied your slip knot, you are going to go ahead and place that slip knot onto your crochet hook and pull slightly. You want this loop to be very loose, almost big enough that you could get another crochet hook the same thickness through there. Your life will be so much easier when you are getting started if you make your chain and that first slip knot nice and loose. And do make sure that you leave about a 6-inch tail. You don't have to get out a tape measure or anything, although you'll have one. But you just want to make sure that that tail is not super, super short. I hope that helped you get started with your project.